The war room of the Galactic High Command had witnessed many things over its 7,000-year history. Declarations of intergalactic conflict, the signing of peace treaties that lasted approximately 14 minutes, and once, memorably, a heated debate about whether the cafeteria's mystery meat was actually edible or merely a biological weapon in disguise. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, had prepared Admiral Quiblex Thornweaver and his distinguished council of military strategists for the pile of reports currently scattered across their mahogany conference table like confetti at a particularly depressing funeral. "What?" thundered General Vexillus Krakenthorpe, his four eyes bulging in a way that suggested either extreme confusion or severe indigestion. "In the name of the great cosmic turnip are we supposed to make of this?" The reports in question had arrived via the usual channels, which is to say, they'd been carried by a junior officer who looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else in the known universe, preferably somewhere with better coffee and fewer chances of being vaporized for delivering. Bad news. These weren't ordinary reconnaissance reports, mind you. These were the kind of documents that make seasoned military analysts question their career choices and consider taking up something safer, like juggling live grenades or dating sentient black holes. "Sir!" squeaked Lieutenant Bumblethwaite Noodlehorn, consulting his datapad with the sort of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts or really good pizza. The initial scans of the third planet in the Sol system indicate a Class C civilization with basic spaceflight capabilities, approximately 2 billion inhabitants, and standard defensive protocols. "Standard?" Admiral Thornweaver's voice reached a pitch that could shatter diamond, and frequently did during particularly intense briefings. "Lieutenant, are you telling me that a standard Class C civilization has somehow managed to turn our most advanced reconnaissance probe into what does appear to be exactly?" The lieutenant glanced down at his notes, which seemed to be written in a combination of official military jargon and what looked suspiciously like crayon. A disco ball, sir, with LED lights and a small speaker playing something called Dancing Queen by ABBA. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggests the universe itself has temporarily stopped to process information that simply shouldn't exist. General Krakenthorpe slowly sat down, which was impressive considering he'd been standing behind his chair. Admiral Thornweaver blinked all 7 of his eyes in a sequence that resembled a broken traffic light having an existential crisis. "They turned our 1,000,000-credit stealth reconnaissance probe," Admiral Thornweaver said with the careful precision of someone trying very hard not to have a complete mental breakdown, "into a disco ball. With music, sir. The report indicates they seemed quite pleased with it. Dr. Willoughby Snorkelbottom, the High Command's chief xenobiologist and part-time philosopher, cleared what passed for his throat. Dr. Snorkelbottom was one of those individuals who collected degrees the way some people collect stamps, except considerably more boring to talk to at parties. "Admiral, if I may suggest, perhaps we should examine the broader pattern of data before drawing any conclusions." "The broader pattern?" General Krakenthorpe had apparently found his voice again, though whether this was good news remained debatable. "What broader pattern could possibly explain turning military hardware into party decorations?" Dr. Snorkelbottom adjusted his spectacles, which was purely for show since his species didn't actually have eyes in the traditional sense, but had developed the gesture through years of academic pretension. "Well, General, that's precisely what troubles me. According to these reports, this isn't an isolated incident." The good doctor proceeded to spread out additional documents across the table with the sort of theatrical flair usually associated with stage magicians or people trying to sell you insurance. Each report was more baffling than the last, which was saying something, considering the disco ball incident had already broken several scientific laws and at least one military regulation. Observation Post Gamma 7 reports that their camouflaged listening station was discovered by the inhabitants, Dr. Snorkelbottom continued, his voice taking on the sort of academic drone that could put caffeinated insomniacs to sleep. "However, Instead of reporting it to their authorities or treating it as a threat, they appear to have adopted it. Adopted it? Yes, Admiral. They've named it Big Bertha, painted it bright yellow, and are apparently using it as a landmark for something called geocaching. The station's commander reports being fed regularly and having received several handmade sweaters. Lieutenant Noodlehorn raised a tentative appendage. Sir, there's also the incident with the automated survey drone in Sector 12. Oh, please tell me they didn't turn that into a household appliance. Worse, sir, they've made it their mayor. No. The silence that followed was even more profound than the previous silence, which was quite an achievement in the field of meaningful pauses. Admiral Thornweaver slowly lowered his head into his hands, which made a sound remarkably similar to a deflating balloon at a children's party where all the children have food poisoning. "Their mayor," he repeated, his voice muffled by his palms and what appeared to be the slow death of his sanity. "They elected our military surveillance drone as their mayor. Apparently it promised to fix the potholes and improve the public transportation system," Lieutenant Noodlehorn added helpfully. "It won by a landslide. The local newspaper called it refreshingly honest and praised its no-nonsense approach to fiscal responsibility." Dr. Snorkelbottom cleared his throat again, which suggested more bad news was incoming, like a meteorite aimed directly at everyone's day. "I'm afraid there's more, Admiral. The Deep Space Monitoring Array in the Outer Rim has been tracking unusual energy signatures from the Sol system for the past 6 months." "What kind of unusual energy signatures?" "Well, sir, that's where things get a bit peculiar." General Krakenthorpe made a noise that sounded like a water buffalo being slowly strangled by a particularly vengeful accordion. "More peculiar than a disco ball probe and a mayoral drone. The energy signatures appear to be coming from what the inhabitants call Florida," Dr. Snorkelbottom announced with the sort of gravity usually reserved for declaring war or announcing that the cafeteria was out of pudding cups. "Our long-range sensors indicate a concentration of quantum anomalies, probability distortions, and what can only be described as weaponized stupidity." Weaponized stupidity? It's the only scientific term that adequately describes the phenomenon, sir. Our computers have been trying to process the data for months, and 3 of them have requested transfers to other departments. One actually submitted a resignation letter written entirely in binary code, which loosely translates to, "I didn't sign up for this nonsense." The DJ Admiral Thornweaver stood up slowly, walked to the massive viewing window that dominated one wall of the war room, and stared out at the swirling nebula beyond. The nebula was beautiful in the way that extremely dangerous things often are, like poisonous flowers or tax auditors. But right now, it seemed positively mundane compared to the reports scattered across his conference table. "Gentlemen," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd suddenly realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was not merely wrong, but spectacularly wrong in ways that defied both logic and good taste. "I believe we need to take a different approach to this situation." "What did you have in mind, sir?" asked General Krakenthorpe, who had been remarkably quiet for the past few minutes, probably trying to figure out how to explain this mess to his superiors without being immediately committed to a very comfortable mental institution. "We're going to do something that goes against every principle of military intelligence gathering that has been developed over the past millennium," Admiral Thornweaver announced, turning back to face his staff with the sort of expression usually seen on people who've just realized they've been trying to unlock their front door with a banana. "We're going to send scientists." The collective intake of breath that followed this announcement could have powered a small space station. In the military hierarchy of the Galactic High Command, suggesting that scientists should handle a situation was roughly equivalent to suggesting that the problem should be resolved through interpretive dance, or by asking very nicely. Dr. Snorkelbottom, however, perked up considerably, which was impressive since his species expressed enthusiasm by changing colors like a cosmic mood ring. "Admiral, I believe that's an excellent suggestion. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we can formulate any kind of strategic response." Strategic response? General Krakenthorpe's voice had reached frequencies that were probably violating several noise ordinances. What strategic response could possibly be appropriate for a species that turns our surveillance equipment into party decorations and municipal leaders? "That, General," Admiral Thornweaver said with the sort of grim satisfaction that comes from finally having a plan, even if it's a terrible one, "is exactly what we need to find out." And so, 3 days later, the distinguished research vessel, definitely not here to study you, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its hull bristling with scientific instruments, observation equipment, and a rather impressive collection of backup recording devices in case the first set got turned into something inexplicable. Dr. Snorkelbottom stood on the bridge, surrounded by his team of researchers, xenobiologists, cultural anthropologists, and one very nervous intern who'd drawn the short straw and been assigned to monitor what the humans called social media. The intern, whose name was Percival Wobblethink, had developed a nervous tic in his left eye after approximately 30 seconds of exposure to something called TikTok. "All right, team," Dr. Snorkelbottom announced with the sort of academic enthusiasm that made normal people want to hide under their desks. "Our mission is simple. We're going to observe this species in their natural habitat and determine exactly what makes them so unique." "Sir," interrupted Dr. Millicent Quagglebonk, the ship's chief behavioral analyst, "I've been reviewing the preliminary cultural data, and I have to say the patterns are disturbing." "How so?" Dr. Quagglebonk consulted her notes, which were considerably more extensive than anyone had expected, and contained several diagrams that hurt to look at directly. "Well, sir, they appear to have a cultural practice called extreme sports, which involves deliberately putting themselves in mortal danger for what they term fun. The data includes something called wingsuit flying, where they jump off cliffs wearing fabric wings, and free climbing, where they scale vertical rock faces without safety equipment. Perhaps they're testing the limits of their physical capabilities for military purposes," suggested Dr. Nigel Bumbershoot, the team's military liaison. "That's what I thought initially," Dr. Quagglebonk continued, "but further research indicates they also engage in competitive eating contests, where they consume dangerous quantities of food for prizes and social recognition. Last month, someone ate 68 hot dogs in 10 minutes. Dr. Snorkelbottom blinked, which was his species equivalent of a double take. 68 what in 10 minutes? "Hot dogs, sir. They're cylindrical meat products served in bread. The consumption rate equates to approximately 1 every 8.8 seconds. Is this some form of ritualistic preparation for warfare?" "No, sir. It was held at a place called Coney Island and was broadcast live to millions of viewers who appeared to find it entertaining." Percival Wobblethink looked up from his monitoring station, his eye twitching at approximately 60 beats per minute. "Dr. Snorkelbottom, sir, I think you should see this." "What is it, Wobblethink?" "I've been monitoring their communications networks, specifically something called Twitter, and, sir, I don't think our computers are equipped to process this level of chaos." Dr. Snorkelbottom approached the monitoring station with the caution of someone approaching an unexploded bomb that might also be emotionally unstable. The screen displayed a constant stream of text messages, images, and videos that seemed to follow no logical pattern whatsoever. "What exactly am I looking at, Wobblethink?" "That's just it, sir. I'm not entirely sure. In the past hour, I've observed heated debates about whether a hot dog is a sandwich, 17 different conspiracy theories about birds not being real, and approximately 43 videos of humans attempting to teach various animals to dance." "Birds not being real?" Apparently, sir, some humans believe that all birds are actually sophisticated surveillance drones operated by their government. The theory has millions of followers. Dr. Snorkelbottom stared at the screen for several long moments, his academic mind trying to process information that seemed designed specifically to break academic minds. Wobblethink, are you telling me that a significant portion of this species believes that an entire category of biological life forms is actually mechanical surveillance equipment? Yes, sir. There are humans who spend considerable time and energy attempting to expose the bird conspiracy. They have merchandise, organized meetings, and detailed analyses of bird behavior that they claim proves mechanical origin. But they do have actual surveillance equipment. We've seen their surveillance equipment. Some of our probes are currently their surveillance equipment. I know, sir, that's what makes it so confusing. Dr. Bumbershoot leaned over Wobblethink's shoulder to peer at the screen. Perhaps they're more sophisticated than we initially thought. This could be an elaborate counterintelligence operation designed to confuse potential invaders. That's what I hoped initially, Wobblethink replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent too much time staring into an abyss that stared back with memes. But then I discovered something called Florida Man. The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the ship's systems and what sounded suspiciously like Dr. Quagglebonk quietly weeping into her research notes. Florida Man? Dr. Snorkelbottom asked, though part of him really didn't want to know. It's a phenomenon, sir. Every day, multiple news stories emerge from the geographical region called Florida, featuring humans engaging in activities that defy not only logic and safety protocols, but occasionally the laws of physics themselves. Wobblethink pulled up a series of news headlines that scrolled across his screen like a parade of human achievement run entirely off the rails. Yesterday's headlines include Florida Man arrested for teaching squirrels to water ski, Florida Man builds rocket in backyard, accidentally creates portal to neighbor's pool, and Florida Man challenges hurricane to single combat, loses, demands rematch. Dr. Snorkelbottom sat down heavily in his command chair, which made a small sigh of mechanical sympathy. Wobblethink, are you suggesting that an entire geographical region of this planet is populated by individuals who routinely engage in activities that violate basic survival instincts? Not just violate them, sir. They seem to have weaponized the violation. There's actually a statistical correlation between the perceived impossibility of a news story and the likelihood that it originated in Florida. Doctor. Quagglebonk looked up from her notes, her eyes red from what might have been scientific frustration or cosmic horror. Doctor, I've been analyzing their entertainment industry, and I'm beginning to suspect that their entire culture is built around actively seeking out dangerous, illogical, and impossible situations. How so? They have something called reality television, where they voluntarily place themselves in artificial survival situations, isolated locations with people they dislike, or competitive environments designed to create maximum psychological stress. Millions of them watch these programs for entertainment. Perhaps it's training for actual survival scenarios? That's what I thought. But then I discovered game shows where they compete for prizes by answering questions or completing physical challenges while subjected to various forms of humiliation, physical discomfort, or time pressure. Dr. Snorkelbottom rubbed his temples, which was purely a learned behavior since his species didn't get headaches, but somehow seemed appropriate for the situation. Let me understand this correctly. They voluntarily subject themselves to stress, danger, and humiliation for entertainment. It gets worse, sir. They also have something called pranks, where they deliberately surprise, confuse, or mildly terrify each other for amusement. Some of these pranks are elaborate operations involving multiple people, complex scenarios, and significant financial investment. Financial investment in scaring each other. Yes, sir. There are entire television shows dedicated to documenting elaborate pranks. People become celebrities for their ability to create confusion and temporary distress in others. Wobblethink raised his hand tentatively. "Doctor, if I may add something?" "Please do, Wobblethink. At this point, I feel like we've passed beyond the boundaries of normal incomprehension and entered some sort of advanced bewilderment territory. I've been monitoring their educational systems and, sir, they teach their children to question everything." The bridge fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of professionals realizing they might be dealing with something far more complex than initially anticipated. "Could you elaborate on that, Wobblethink?" "Well, sir, their educational philosophy emphasizes critical thinking, creativity, and what they call thinking outside the box. And from a very early age, they're encouraged to challenge conventional wisdom, experiment with new ideas, and find innovative solutions to problems." "That sounds actually quite reasonable." "It would be, sir, except they appear to have no mechanism for determining when to stop questioning things. I found records of children's science fair projects that include "Can goldfish learn calculus?" and "What happens if you replace all the furniture in a house with trampolines?" "Doctor." Bumbershoot looked up from his tactical analysis. "Wait, what does happen if you replace all the furniture with trampolines?" "According to the project report, sir, chaos, but fun chaos." Dr. Snorkelbottom stood up and began pacing, which was his species' equivalent of pulling out hair in frustration. "Let me see if I understand the situation correctly. We have a species that turns our surveillance equipment into party decorations, and municipal leaders, actively seeks out danger for entertainment, teaches their children to question everything including the reality of birds, and considers chaos, but fun chaos, to be a reasonable scientific conclusion." "That's a fairly accurate summary, yes, sir." "And they've somehow developed spaceflight, complex communication networks, and what appears to be a stable global civilization." "Multiple stable civilizations, actually, sir. They have something like 200 separate governmental units, most of which seem to function despite operating on completely different philosophical, economic, and social principles." Dr. Snorkelbottom stopped pacing and stared out at the blue and green planet rotating peacefully in the view screen. From this distance, it looked perfectly normal, serene even. There was no indication that its surface was populated by creatures who challenged hurricanes to single combat and elected surveillance drones to positions of municipal authority. "Dr. Quagglebonk," he said finally, "what does your behavioral analysis suggest about this species' military capabilities?" Dr. Quagglebonk consulted her notes, flipped through several pages that appeared to be covered in question marks and small drawings of confused faces, and cleared her throat. "Sir, that's where the analysis becomes problematic. More problematic. Their military history suggests they're capable of both incredible strategic brilliance and stunning tactical incompetence, sometimes within the same conflict. They have examples of forces winning battles they should have lost through pure audacity and losing battles they should have won through overconfidence. That's not entirely unusual among military forces. Sir, they have documented cases of military units that won engagements by doing things that were so strategically unsound that the enemy couldn't predict or counter them. There's a battle where one side won by playing loud music and charging directly into what should have been certain death. And this worked? Apparently, the opposing force was so confused by the tactical impossibility of the maneuver that they failed to respond appropriately. The attacking force achieved complete victory through what military analysts describe as weaponized stupidity. Dr. Bumbershoot looked up from his tactical display. "Doctor, I've been analyzing their current military capabilities, and the patterns are inconsistent." "How so?" "They possess nuclear weapons capable of destroying their entire planet several times over, but they also have military units whose primary weapon appears to be a large knife attached to the end of a long stick. Surely those are ceremonial units." That's what I thought. But according to the records, they've used these bayonet weapons in actual combat within the past 50 years. Apparently there are situations where they prefer stabbing to nuclear annihilation. Wobblethink looked up from his monitoring station, his eye now twitching at a rate that suggested he might be developing his own quantum probability field. Doctors, I found something else. What now, Wobblethink? They have something called sports, sir, and I think it might be how they train their population for warfare. Dr. Snorkelbottom approached the monitoring station with the weary resignation of someone who'd already accepted that nothing was going to make sense anymore. Show me. The screen displayed images of humans engaged in various physical activities that seemed to combine elements of combat, strategy, and elaborate ritual. There were humans throwing balls at targets, hitting balls with sticks, carrying balls across designated territories, while other humans attempted to stop them through the application of controlled violence, and kicking balls into nets, while millions of other humans watched and screamed. This is warfare training? That's what I thought initially, sir. But the patterns are all wrong. They engage in these activities for entertainment, social bonding, and something called team spirit. But the strategic elements are remarkable. Wobblethink pulled up a series of tactical diagrams that looked suspiciously like military formation analyses. This activity, called football, involves coordinated unit movements, strategic deception, rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions, and precise timing of complex maneuvers. That does sound like military training. Yes, sir, except they do it while wearing colorful uniforms, being watched by thousands of spectators and stopping every few minutes for something called commercial breaks. Dr. Quagglebonk leaned over to examine the tactical displays. Wobblethink, are you suggesting they've turned warfare training into mass entertainment? It's worse than that, Dr. Quagglebonk. I think they've turned everything into either entertainment or a competition. They have competitive eating, competitive sleeping, competitive sitting still, and something called competitive binge-watching, where people compete to see who can watch the most television without moving. Dr. Snorkelbottom sat down again, his academic mind finally reaching the point where it simply refused to process any more information. Wobblethink, in your professional opinion, what kind of species are we dealing with? Sir, I honestly don't know. Every time I think I've identified a pattern, they do something that completely contradicts it. They're simultaneously brilliant and ridiculous, logical and insane, peaceful and violent, cooperative and competitive. Could they be deliberately trying to confuse us? That's what I hoped, sir, but I don't think they're that organized. I think they're just this way. Doctor, Bumbershoot looked up from his displays, his expression suggesting he'd reached conclusions that he wasn't entirely comfortable sharing. Doctors, I've been running probability analyses on various contact scenarios, and I think we have a problem. Another problem. All of our standard first contact protocols assume we're dealing with a rational species operating within predictable parameters. And these humans don't fit those parameters. Sir, these humans don't appear to fit any parameters. Our computers have been trying to model their behavior patterns, and the results are unsettling. Dr. Bumbershoot activated his main display, which showed a complex three-dimensional model that looked like it had been designed by someone with a severe migraine and a grudge against geometry. This is our best attempt at modeling human behavior based on available data. The model was a writhing, pulsating mess of intersecting lines, probability curves, and what appeared to be several small explosions occurring at random intervals. What am I looking at? Chaos, sir. Pure, unadulterated chaos with occasional spikes of brilliance that defy mathematical explanation. Dr. Snorkelbottom stared at the model, trying to find some pattern or logic that his trained academic mind could grasp. There wasn't any. Bumbershoot, what happens if we try to apply standard military strategies against this chaos model? Dr. Bumbershoot input several tactical scenarios into his computer, waited for the calculations to complete, and then stared at the results with the expression of someone who'd just been told that mathematics had decided to take a vacation and might not be coming back. "Sir, according to the simulations, any attempt to apply conventional military strategy against this species results in what the computer describes as catastrophic strategic failure due to impossible variables." Impossible variables? The model suggests that humans would respond to military threats in ways that don't make tactical sense, but somehow result in either complete victory or spectacular failure, with no middle ground. Could you be more specific? Well, sir, in one simulation, a human population responds to an invasion by welcoming the invaders, teaching them local customs, and gradually converting the occupying force into enthusiastic participants in something called community theater. And in other simulations, in another scenario, they respond to a superior military force by developing technology that shouldn't be possible, organizing resistance movements that operate on principles of controlled chaos, and somehow turning the invasion into a competitive sport with judges and award ceremonies. Dr. Snorkelbottom rubbed his temples again, feeling the beginnings of what he was pretty sure was the first headache in his species' evolutionary history. "Bumbershoot, what are the odds of a successful conventional military campaign against this species?" Dr. Bumbershoot consulted his calculations, ran them again to make sure, consulted a different computer to verify the results, and then looked up with an expression of professional despair. "Sir, the probability analysis indicates that any military action against humanity has approximately a 60% chance of ending with us joining their Olympic Games as a competing species." "Their what?" "Olympic Games, sir. It's a massive international competition where thousands of athletes compete in dozens of different sports, while billions of spectators watch and nations award medals based on performance." "That doesn't sound so bad." "Sir, one of the events is synchronized diving, where humans jump off tall platforms while attempting to perform identical acrobatic maneuvers in perfect coordination. And we'd be expected to participate in this. According to the probability models, yes, sir, the computer suggests there's also a significant chance we'd become quite good at it." Dr. Quagglebonk looked up from her behavioral analysis charts, which had evolved from confused question marks to what appeared to be abstract art therapy. "Doctors, I think I may have found the source of our analytical difficulties. Please, Dr. Quagglebonk, any insight would be appreciated at this point. I believe we've been approaching this species from the wrong angle. We've been trying to understand them as a conventional civilization, but I don't think that's what they are. What do you think they are?" "Sir, I think they're a species that has evolved beyond the need for logical consistency. They appear to operate on a principle of beneficial chaos, where unpredictability itself becomes a survival advantage." Doctor Snorkelbottom considered this theory, which was simultaneously the most ridiculous and most sensible explanation he'd heard all day. "Dr. Quagglebonk, are you suggesting that humans have weaponized randomness?" "Not weaponized, sir. I think they've domesticated it. They've created a civilization that functions specifically because it doesn't follow predictable patterns. Any external threat that tries to counter their behavior using conventional logic will fail, because there is no conventional logic to counter." Wobblethink looked up from his monitoring station, his eye twitching, now synchronized with the ship's navigational beacon. "Doctors, I think Dr. Quagglebonk might be right. I've been analyzing their problem-solving methodologies, and they seem to approach challenges by trying everything that shouldn't work until something does work." Could you provide an example?" "Yes, sir. When they needed to put humans on their moon, they built a massive rocket that used controlled explosions to achieve escape velocity. When the rocket developed potentially catastrophic problems during flight, they fixed them using spare parts, duct tape, and what they call creative engineering." That actually sounds reasonably logical. It would be, sir, except their backup plan for catastrophic failure was to have the astronauts use their lunar landing module as a lifeboat and navigate back to Earth using manual calculations and prayer. Prayer? A form of hopeful communication with theoretical supernatural entities, sir. Approximately 85% of the human population engages in some form of prayer, despite having no empirical evidence that it produces measurable results. And this works for them. Apparently, sir, their space program has had a remarkably high success rate considering they're essentially using controlled explosions to hurl people into the vacuum of space and hoping everything goes according to plans that include, and then we'll figure it out. Dr. Bumbershoot pulled up another tactical display. Doctors, I've been analyzing human conflict resolution strategies, and I think I understand why our military protocols are ineffective. Please explain. Humans appear to have developed a form of warfare that incorporates elements of negotiation, entertainment, economic competition, and social media campaigns. Modern human conflicts are resolved through a combination of military action, diplomatic maneuvering, economic pressure, and something called winning hearts and minds. That sounds actually quite sophisticated. It would be, sir, except winning hearts and minds apparently involves sending soldiers to build schools, distribute candy to children, and participate in local cultural events while simultaneously maintaining combat readiness. They combine warfare with community outreach? Yes, sir, and according to the historical records, this approach is remarkably effective at creating long-term stability. Dr. Snorkelbottom stood up and walked back to the view screen, staring at the blue planet that continued to rotate peacefully, completely unaware that it was giving some of the galaxy's finest minds a collective nervous breakdown. Team, I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to this species. What do you suggest, sir? I suggest we need to contact Admiral Thornweaver and inform him that humanity represents a form of intelligence we've never encountered before. Ooh, what kind of intelligence? Dr. Snorkelbottom turned back to his team with the expression of someone who just realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was not merely wrong, but had been wrong in ways that were actually quite entertaining once you got used to the idea. Adaptive chaos intelligence, he announced, with the sort of academic precision that made complex ideas sound both official and completely insane. They've evolved a form of consciousness that treats unpredictability as a strategic advantage rather than a problem to be solved. Sir, what are the implications for potential contact? Dr. Quagglebonk, I believe the implications are that any attempt to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity using conventional protocols will result in us accidentally joining their civilization rather than establishing separate diplomatic ties. Is that necessarily a bad thing, sir? Dr. Snorkelbottom considered the question while watching a small blue planet continue its ancient rotation around a perfectly ordinary yellow star. Wobblethink, show me that Olympic Games footage again. The monitoring station displayed images of thousands of humans engaged in various athletic competitions, while millions more cheered from stadium seats and billions watched through their communication networks. The athletes displayed remarkable physical capabilities, intense dedication, and obvious joy in their achievements. Dr. Quagglebonk, what's your professional assessment of human recreational activities? Sir, they appear to have created an entire global culture based on celebrating individual excellence, international cooperation, and friendly competition. And, Dr. Bumbershoot, what's your tactical assessment? Sir, any species that can organize peaceful international competitions involving hundreds of nations while maintaining enthusiasm for activities that require jumping over high bars, throwing heavy objects for distance, and seeing who can run in circles fastest. I think they might be more advanced than us. Dr. Snorkelbottom nodded slowly, coming to a conclusion that was simultaneously terrifying and oddly reassuring. Team, prepare a complete report for Admiral Thornweaver. What should the report conclude, sir? That humanity represents a successful evolutionary solution we never considered, which is, they've created a stable, advancing civilization by embracing chaos, celebrating unpredictability, and turning everything into either entertainment or a learning experience. And our recommendation for contact protocols? Dr. Snorkelbottom smiled, which was his species equivalent of either great joy or complete madness, and sometimes it was difficult to tell the difference. I recommend we approach them as students rather than conquerors. Students. Wobblethink, show me that Florida man data again. Back at Galactic High Command, Admiral Thornweaver read Dr. Snorkelbottom's report 3 times, had his computer verify the translation twice, and then summoned his staff for what would later be remembered as either the most important or most ridiculous military briefing in galactic history. Gentlemen, Admiral Thornweaver announced to his assembled officers, holding up the research report like it was either a priceless artifact or a dangerous explosive device. I have received Dr. Snorkelbottom's analysis of the Sol 3 species. What's the assessment, sir? Asked General Krakenthorpe, who had spent the past week trying to explain to High Command why their surveillance equipment kept getting repurposed for civilian use. According to Dr. Snorkelbottom's team, humanity has achieved something we previously thought was impossible. What's that, sir? They've created a stable, technologically advanced civilization that operates on principles of controlled chaos, adaptive randomness, and beneficial unpredictability. The war room fell silent, except for the sound of several military officers trying to process information that challenged every principle of strategic planning they'd ever learned. Sir, Lieutenant Noodlehorn ventured cautiously, what does that mean for our defensive posture? Lieutenant, according to this report, any attempt to establish a defensive posture against humanity is fundamentally impossible because they don't operate according to any strategic principles we can predict or counter. But, sir, surely they must have some weaknesses we can exploit. Admiral Thornweaver consulted the report again, flipping through pages of analysis that seemed to defy not only military logic, but several laws of physics. According to Dr. Snorkelbottom, their primary weakness appears to be an irresistible compulsion to help others, but they've somehow weaponized this weakness into a strategic advantage. How does one weaponize helping people, sir? Apparently, Lieutenant, when humans encounter a problem, their instinctive response is to solve it through a combination of creative thinking, collaborative effort, and what Dr. Snorkelbottom describes as aggressive optimism. General Krakenthorpe raised a tentative appendage. Admiral, aggressive optimism. They believe, General, that any problem can be solved if you throw enough enthusiasm, creativity, and caffeine at it. And according to this report, they're usually right. The General made a sound like a deflating balloon filled with existential dread. Sir, what happens if we try to invade a species that solves problems through aggressive optimism? Admiral Thornweaver turned to a specific page in the report, one that Dr. Snorkelbottom had marked with approximately 17 warning symbols, and what appeared to be a small drawing of a nervous breakdown. According to the probability analysis, General, there's a 73% chance they'd respond to an invasion by organizing a welcome committee, planning cultural exchange programs, and somehow convincing our invasion force to help them build better infrastructure. And the other 27%? Complete tactical victory achieved through methods so logically impossible that our military computers refuse to process the scenarios. Lieutenant Noodlehorn cleared his throat, which produced a sound remarkably similar to a small animal choking on its own surprise. Sir, what does High Command expect us to do with this information? Admiral Thornweaver set down the report and walked to his command window, gazing out at the vast expanse of space that suddenly seemed much more complicated than it had been a week ago. Lieutenant, High Command has issued new orders regarding the Sol system. What are our orders, sir? We're establishing a permanent research station at a safe distance from the Sol system, and we're going to observe. Observe, sir. Dr. Snorkelbottom believes that humanity may represent an entirely new form of evolutionary development. High Command wants to understand how they achieved stable civilization through controlled chaos before we attempt any form of official contact. General Krakenthorpe consulted his tactical displays, which were showing probability models that looked like abstract art created by a computer having a nervous breakdown. Admiral, how long does High Command estimate this observation period should last? Dr. Snorkelbottom recommends a minimum of 50 years, General. 50 years? According to his analysis, that's approximately how long it will take our best xenobiologists, sociologists, and military strategists to develop contact protocols that won't result in accidentally joining their civilization. Sir, is accidentally joining their civilization necessarily a bad outcome? Admiral Thornweaver considered this question while watching a small maintenance drone attempt to repair a communication array that had mysteriously started playing what appeared to be human music. The drone seemed to be enjoying itself, which was concerning for reasons that nobody could quite articulate. General, Doctor, Snorkelbottom's final recommendation suggests that humanity may represent the next stage of galactic evolution. How so, sir? They've solved problems that we didn't even know were problems. They've created technology we thought was impossible using methods we thought were stupid. They've built a global civilization that thrives on diversity, celebrates individual achievement, and somehow maintains stability through constant change. Lieutenant Noodlehorn looked up from his datapad, where he'd been reading additional excerpts from Dr. Snorkelbottom's report. Sir, there's a section here about something called memes. What are memes, Lieutenant? According to Dr. Snorkelbottom, they're units of cultural information that spread through their population via their communication networks. But, sir, these memes appear to be evolving. Evolving how? They start as simple ideas or images, but as they spread from human to human, they become more complex, more sophisticated, and somehow more alive. Admiral Thornweaver felt a familiar sensation in his command centers, the kind of feeling that suggested the universe was about to become significantly more complicated than anyone had prepared for. Lieutenant, are you telling me that human ideas reproduce? It's worse than that, sir. According to Dr. Snorkelbottom's analysis, their memes appear to be developing their own form of intelligence. General Krakenthorpe made a noise that sounded like a quantum computer trying to divide by zero. You mean their ideas are becoming sentient? Dr. Snorkelbottom isn't certain, sir, but he notes that some human memes display characteristics of adaptive behavior, strategic thinking, and what appears to be a sense of humor. Their ideas have a sense of humor? Yes, sir. Apparently, the most successful human memes are the ones that are funny, surprising, or emotionally engaging. Dr. Snorkelbottom suggests that humans have accidentally created a form of artificial intelligence that spreads through entertainment rather than technology. Admiral Thornweaver sat down in his command chair, which had been designed to provide comfort and support during even the most stressful military situations. It was not, however, designed to cope with the possibility that an entire species had accidentally created sentient entertainment that reproduced through social networks. Gentlemen, he announced, with the careful precision of someone trying very hard to maintain sanity in the face of information that actively challenged the concept of sanity. I believe we need to revise our understanding of what constitutes advanced civilization. How so, sir? According to Dr. Snorkelbottom's analysis, humans have achieved something that our most advanced civilizations consider theoretically impossible, which is, they've created a stable society that actually improves through chaos, conflict, and change, rather than being destroyed by it. General Krakenthorpe consulted his tactical analyses, which had evolved from simple probability curves to what appeared to be three-dimensional poetry written in mathematics. Admiral, what are the strategic implications of this discovery? General, I believe the strategic implications are that we need to fundamentally reconsider our assumptions about intelligence, civilization, and the nature of successful social organization. And our immediate tactical response? Admiral Thornweaver stood up and activated the main communications array, preparing to send a message that would fundamentally alter the Galactic High Command's understanding of their place in the universe. General, our immediate tactical response is to inform High Command that we've discovered a species that may be more advanced than us in ways we didn't know were possible. More advanced, sir. Doctor. Snorkelbottom's final conclusion, General, is that humanity has solved the fundamental problem of civilization. Which fundamental problem? How to maintain progress, stability, and individual freedom simultaneously while actually enjoying the process. Duralulish, the communication that Admiral Thornweaver sent to Galactic High Command that day was later classified at the highest security levels, not because it contained sensitive military information, but because it fundamentally challenged every assumption about intelligence and civilization that the galactic community had developed over millions of years of careful, logical, predictable social evolution. The message was simple. Humanity has achieved stable technological civilization through adaptive chaos, beneficial unpredictability, and weaponized optimism. Recommend immediate establishment of long-term observation protocols and development of new contact strategies based on principles of collaborative learning rather than strategic dominance. Also recommend upgrading our entertainment systems. These humans appear to have mastered the art of enjoying themselves while solving impossible problems, and frankly, we could learn something from that approach. 3 months later, the Galactic Research Station, definitely just here for scientific purposes, established orbit at the edge of the Sol system, its mission officially designated as long-term xenocultural analysis and unofficially known as trying to figure out how they do that. Dr. Snorkelbottom, now promoted to Chief of Impossible Studies, stood on the observation deck of the research station, watching Earth rotate peacefully in the distance, while his team of researchers attempted to analyze a species that seemed determined to defy analysis. "Daily report, Dr. Quagglebonk," he requested, settling into his command chair with the weary satisfaction of someone who'd finally found a research project that was guaranteed to keep him busy for the rest of his career. "Sir, today's observations include the discovery that humans have created something called parkour, which involves navigating urban environments by jumping, climbing, and vaulting over obstacles purely for the physical and mental challenge." That sounds reasonable. Physical fitness and environmental adaptation are important survival skills. Yes, sir, except they've turned it into an art form. They create videos of parkour performances, organize competitions, and use it as a form of self-expression and community building. They turn survival skills into ART? It's worse than that, sir. They've also created something called cosplay, where they design and wear elaborate costumes representing fictional characters, then gather in large groups to celebrate their shared appreciation for creative storytelling. Doctor. Snorkelbottom rubbed his temples, a gesture that had become so automatic he was considering having it surgically enhanced for efficiency. "Dr. Quagglebonk, are you telling me they dress up as imaginary people? For fun?" "Yes, sir. And some of these costumes are engineering marvels that incorporate advanced electronics, articulated mechanical components, and sophisticated materials. They're essentially creating wearable technology for the purpose of pretending to be fictional characters. But why? According to my analysis, sir, they do it because it makes them happy. They enjoy the creative challenge, the social interaction, and the opportunity to temporarily become someone else." Dr. Snorkelbottom stared out at Earth, trying to imagine a species that invested significant time, energy and resources into elaborate costumes purely for the joy of creative expression. Dr. Quagglebonk, what's your professional assessment of a species that creates advanced technology for the purpose of happiness? Sir, I think they might be the most sophisticated civilization we've ever encountered. How so? They've solved the fundamental question of technological development. What's the point of advancing technology if it doesn't make life more enjoyable? Wobblethink looked up from his monitoring station, where he'd been tracking human communication networks with the dedicated intensity of someone trying to map chaos itself. Doctors, I've discovered something new. What is it, Wobblethink? They have something called crowdsourcing, where they solve complex problems by asking millions of people to contribute small pieces of the solution. That sounds like a reasonable approach to distributed problem solving. It would be, sir, except they're using it to solve problems like, what should we name this new flavor of potato chips? And, help us write a story about a dragon who's also a tax accountant. Dr. Snorkelbottom blinked slowly, a gesture that had evolved from surprise to a kind of meditative acceptance of the impossible. They're using sophisticated collaborative problem-solving techniques to create snack food names and fictional stories about mythological creatures in mundane professions. Yes, sir, and the results are surprisingly sophisticated. The Dragon Tax Accountant story has become a best-selling novel that explores themes of identity, social responsibility, and the intersection of fantasy and bureaucracy. Of course it has. Dr. Bumbershoot approached with his daily tactical analysis, which had evolved from standard military assessment to what appeared to be a philosophical treatise on the nature of strategic impossibility. Doctors, I've completed my analysis of human space exploration strategies. Ooh, what did you discover? Sir, they appear to be exploring space using a combination of rigorous scientific methodology and what can only be described as enthusiastic curiosity. That sounds appropriate for space exploration. It would be, sir, except they're also planning missions based on criteria like, it would be really cool to go there. And we want to see if we can grow tomatoes on Mars. They want to grow tomatoes on Mars? Yes, sir. Apparently, they believe that any planet worth visiting is a planet worth gardening on. Dr. Snorkelbottom considered this concept while watching Earth continue its ancient rotation, completely unaware that it was continuing to revolutionize galactic understanding of intelligence and civilization. Dr. Bumbershoot, what's your tactical assessment of a species that approaches space exploration through gardening? Sir, I think they're going to accidentally colonize the galaxy while trying to figure out which vegetables grow best in low gravity. And our defensive response to that scenario? I recommend we start learning about agriculture, sir. Dr. Quagglebonk looked up from her behavioral analysis charts, which had evolved into what appeared to be abstract sculptures representing the impossibility of predicting human behavior. Doctors, I've been analyzing human conflict resolution strategies, and I think I understand why they're so successful. Please explain. They've developed a form of problem solving that incorporates humor, creativity, and what they call thinking outside the box. And when they encounter a problem that seems impossible to solve, they approach it from completely unexpected angles until they find a solution that nobody else would have considered. Could you provide an example? Yes, sir. When they needed to clean up pollution in their oceans, one group of humans developed a plan to use floating barriers powered by ocean currents to collect plastic waste. That sounds reasonably logical. It would be, sir, except the project was started by a teenager who decided to tackle the problem as a school project. He convinced scientists, engineers, and investors to support his idea because, and I quote, "Someone should probably do something about this, and it might as well be me." A teenager decided to clean up the ocean. Yes, sir, and it's working. They're now planning to expand the project globally. Doctor, Snorkelbottom stood up, and walked to the main observation window, gazing at the blue planet that continued to challenge every assumption about intelligence, civilization, and the proper way to organize a technological society. Team, I believe we need to revise our final report to Galactic High Command. What should the revised conclusions be, sir? That humanity represents a successful solution to problems we didn't know we had, such as how to maintain individual creativity within organized society, how to solve complex problems through collaborative effort, how to advance technology while maintaining focus on quality of life, how to explore space while remembering to bring snacks. Dr. Bumbershoot consulted his tactical displays one final time, watching probability models that had given up trying to predict human behavior and had started generating what appeared to be abstract art. Sir, what's our recommendation for galactic policy regarding humanity? Dr. Snorkelbottom smiled, a gesture that in his species indicated either profound satisfaction or complete mental breakdown, and turned back to his team with the expression of someone who'd finally found the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. Dr. Bumbershoot, I recommend that the Galactic High Command establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity based on principles of mutual learning, collaborative problem-solving, and shared appreciation for the absurd. And if they refuse, then we wait until they accidentally invent something impossible, solve a problem that shouldn't be solvable, or figure out how to grow vegetables on a planet that doesn't have soil, and then we ask very politely if they'd be willing to share their methods. Sir, what if they ask us to join their civilization? Dr. Snorkelbottom looked out at Earth one more time, watching a planet full of creatures who turned surveillance equipment into party decorations, elected drones to municipal office, created art out of survival skills, and approached space exploration through gardening, and realized that the question wasn't whether humanity would change galactic civilization, but how much better galactic civilization might become once it learned to embrace beneficial chaos, weaponized optimism, and the revolutionary concept that solving problems should be at least moderately entertaining. Dr. Bumbershoot, he said finally, I think that might be the best offer we ever get. 6 months later, the first official diplomatic contact between humanity and the Galactic High Command took place in what historians would later describe as the most successful first contact in galactic history, primarily because the humans responded to the arrival of alien diplomats by organizing a welcome party, preparing a feast featuring cuisine from every culture on Earth, and asking if the visitors would like to participate in something called a cultural exchange program. The Galactic High Command's carefully prepared first contact protocols, which had been developed over centuries of diplomatic experience and represented the pinnacle of interspecies communication theory, were completely unnecessary. The humans took one look at their visitors, said, "Awesome! You guys are aliens. Want some pizza?" and proceeded to treat first contact as an opportunity to make new friends who happened to come from space. Within a week, human scientists were collaborating with galactic researchers on projects that combined advanced alien technology with what humans cheerfully called creative improvisation. Within a month, human artists were creating collaborative works with alien artists that challenged both species' understanding of aesthetic possibility. Within 6 months, the Galactic High Command was seriously considering adopting several human innovations, including something called Casual Friday and the revolutionary concept of coffee breaks. The final report filed by Dr. Snorkelbottom was classified not as a military intelligence document, but as a philosophical treatise that fundamentally challenged the galactic community's understanding of civilization, progress, and the proper relationship between intelligence and joy. The report's final conclusion was simple. Humanity has achieved something we thought was impossible. They've created a technological civilization that actually makes them happy. Perhaps it's time we learned how they do it.